Hey guys, this unit here is on populism. You can see populism kind of gets its start around the 1870s. We'll talk about that, just exactly when it gets started. We'll talk about that later in the vodcast. And it lasts up until 1897, the very specific year of 1897. If you are interested in reading the textbook pages found on Blackboard, you can see there what pages to cover, and those are posted again on Blackboard for you. As far as objectives go, there's just one. You're looking at why this movement, the populist movement, started. Throughout this unit, I'll talk about why it started, how it started, the leaders behind the movement, and some lasting impact of the movement. But unlike the other presentations, you're not going to see highlighted portion of the notes where it says Objective 1 or Objective 2. This Objective 1 can be found throughout the entire presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. The origin of this movement: it is a political party. It is a political movement, even though it only lasted less than 30 years. But it's not a nationwide movement. It's a reaction to this growing industrial revolution in the country. Industry is taking over, running the farmers out of the east and pushing them to the Midwest. And of course, the government is wanting to populate the Midwest. But it seems like the industrialists and the capitalists are in control of the economy, and the farmers being left behind. So this movement is a reaction to the Industrial Revolution. Here's the ironic part: the government wants the Midwest to be settled by farmers, and when that actually happens, and farmers start to cultivate and make this land profitable, it's almost like the government turns their back on the farmers because of this laissez-faire system that the government had in place. They're not willing to regulate any of the big industries, which the farmers are kind of at the mercy of now, specifically railroad. It is the first political party to come to grips with this new world that's being created by industrialization. The Republicans and Democrats are enjoying the fruits of industrialization, ignoring the negative side effects. The political party, the Populist Party, I should say, is the first group to step back and say, look at the negative side of industrialization, and look what's happening to our farmers in the South and in the West. The Republicans in the East, that's what we mean here, the people in the East, that's Republicans. They see it as a mysterious and dangerous movement. Why are these people upset? Our country's profiting. Why are they angry? I mean, they're getting all these fantastic new tools, these new pieces of machinery to plant and harvest their crop, and they can sell nationwide, worldwide. Why are they angry? So the populists set upon a course of propaganda campaigns of running this party into the ground, often referring to it and alluding to populism at the same time of witchcraft, playing on that fear of witchcraft from the 1600s in the United States back east. The majority of the people who become followers or members of the Populist Party can be found in the South and in the West, and obviously it's typical farmers. Now, we will see here in a moment that industry and farmers have conflicting goals, but we do see the two groups, farmers and laborers, joining together for a common cause. But again, the majority of the people who make up this party are farmers in the South and in the West. It does not become a national movement. Again, less than 30 years of existence, and then it just kind of fades away into the Democratic Party. The leadership is mostly to blame for this. They have a lot of great goals, which again later in this presentation you'll hear the lasting effects. But the leadership here is often criticized as being too old. They're being described by their gray hair and their lack of money. And when they meet at the conventions for nominating officials and nominating party members for political office, they talk about how they come with very little money, no place to sleep. Too many have already seen too many other radical movements, meaning they've been involved. They jump from one radical movement to another. So just kind of a ragtag group of people who create the leadership of the Populist Party. There's the thing I was alluding to earlier, the farmers and Eastern laborers. So the people who are working in factories back east have different goals as far as what the farmers want. The farmers want a lot of different things, which we'll mention later. I don't want to get into now, but we have already talked about labor and their desires. Their desires are better hours, better pay, better conditions, and that doesn't necessarily fit into the farmers' goals. But later on, we will see these two merging to fight for a common cause. To more, there's power in numbers. Essentially, they agree to join together. Essentially, the laboring class and the farmers do blame railroads and the capitalists, industrialists, and for some reason, throughout history, this poor group, the Jews, have been blamed for everything. And there's a stereotypical behavior that accompanies this group of people as far as financial concerns are alluded to. That they control the world's wealth. Hitler blames them at the end of World War I for the loss of World War I, Germany's loss in World War I, and that's one of the reasons why he rounds them up so viciously. But even in our own country, that they're not trusted. So who knows? Now, the social aspect of this party. Again, we're talking about who makes up this political party, this group. This is an interesting slide here. The slide from Minutemen to Hick. Back in the Revolutionary War days, the Minutemen were basically your local and state militia. They were ready on a minute's notice. And back in the day, the Minutemen were farmers. That's what they did. Essentially, that's what everybody did. We were an agrarian society. Now we jump ahead to the 1870s, and a farmer is considered a hick, is considered lower in intelligence, lower in status, lower in quality of life. So there's a unique twist. These both men here are farmers, and yet the man on the left, the Minuteman, actually has an amazing contribution to our country and defending our country, while the man on the right is nothing more than someone who plows the field. What people didn't realize is that the man who plows the field is the one who feeds the masses back east. The farmers had a big fear of city life because of the unknown. There were new life, new entertainment. There's these fan-dangled gas lights, and then eventually electrical lights that are lighting the homes instead of candle and kerosene oil. And then indoor plumbing. I don't even know why they were afraid of indoor plumbing. It just wasn't natural, I guess. I guess outhouses was the way to go, and so anything that go to the bathroom inside your house was kind of fearful for the farmers. But they were definitely afraid of losing their sons and daughters to this city. Well, for the sons and daughters who've grown up on the farm life, they want something different. We see that in our day and age today. Kids who grow up in our area of the United States, they want to get out. They want to move to the big city. They want to see what it's all about. And parents still have that fear of letting go. And the farmers, they thought they were going to lose their children to the big city, and the big city would just swallow them up. Unfortunately for the farmers back in the 1870s, that was probably a reality. If the kids moved to the city, they would get lost in the industries. And the same thing can be said today. The farmers feared a loss of political power. Again, they're being seen as a second-class citizen. Obviously not below the newly freed African Americans, but still second-class nonetheless. And so the farmers start to see the fact that their vote really doesn't count anymore, because it's the capitalists, it's the industrialists, the North, and the industrial Midwest who controls all the elections. Now, the economic impact on farmers is the driving force, essentially, behind the creation of these alliances and eventually the populist movement. Farmers see themselves working more and making less money. After the Civil War, there was a state of deflation. Quick economic lesson here. Deflation means there is less money in circulation, so fewer people have it. On the positive side of things, prices are down. So less money in circulation, prices are down. That's a good thing. Unfortunately, for most people, unless you work or you own a money-making industry, work in the money-making industry, you don't have money. And in regards for the farmers, they're working more and they're getting less because they plant and then they work and then they harvest. So they don't get money on a regular basis. Machines definitely help cut costs because they can plant and harvest at a much quicker rate, but in order to keep up with everything that was going on, they had to work even more. Here's what I mean: they could get 160 acres, and they could plant, harvest, and sell that crop. But because prices are low, they are not going to receive the profit that they're going to need to break even, let alone make a profit. So what they do is they go to the bank and they borrow more money. And let's say now they have 320 acres. This is where the machine comes into play. The machine's going to help them plant and harvest that land effectively, efficiently. Unfortunately, 320 acres worth of food still sells at the same price. Yes, it's more, but you also have to now consider the fact that you have more loan to pay to the bank, and prices are still low. So we're still in this constant case of deflation. They consider themselves small time, the minnows among the whales, so to speak. They think the urban workers, the urban laborers, the industrialists, they're the whales, and they're just getting swallowed up by that group because they're being left behind. The enemies of the farmers are obviously, number one, the railroads, as far as shipping and storage of their crops. The mortgage company, the people who they borrow money from. To get the farm, to get the farm machinery, to get the land, and whatever else they need. High interest rates, so the mortgage companies are enemy. The bank who collects the mortgage fees is not very forgiving, because of course the bank has to make money too. So when the farmer's late on a payment, the bank is very quick to take the farm. And of course the people making the equipment, such as John Deere, know that those machinery items are in high demand, and so they can sell them for a very high price. So they are basically at odds with everyone and at the mercy of everyone. All these companies continue to get small while the farmer get big while the farmer stays small, and these companies get big because of the farmer, on the backs of the farmer, so to speak. Farmers are also part of the world market. These crops that they're selling, 300, 400, or 1,000 acre crops, all of this is not going to the consumer in the United States. The U.S. consumer cannot possibly consume everything that's being produced in the Midwest. So we begin to look for new markets outside the country. So now these farmers are part of the world market. And so now they're not only at the mercy of the U.S. market and supply and demand, they're at the mercy of the world market and supply and demand. Again, the issue of money, probably the number one concern for farmers, besides their enemies and being at the mercy of those enemies. The farmers don't have the money. If they had money on a regular basis, if they had money readily available to them, I think the issues of the railroads and the banks and the mortgage companies would be lessened. There were still obviously problems and issues with the lack of regulation, but the problems would be lessened. The money doesn't solve problems, but it seems to make problems seem a little more acceptable, or you have options. And so for the farmers, their argument was not enough hard cash, and we're talking about physical paper currency, paper bills. During the Civil War, the North printed paper bills called greenbacks, and then they slowly pulled those out of circulation, and that's where we see this deflation coming on. And so this is obviously worse in the South, is state of deflation, because there's no money flowing, there's no industry to get jobs, and so we see the conditions worse in the South. The money of the time was obviously gold, banknotes, stamps, and company script. We'll look at some examples of these here in a minute. To give you an idea of how bad it was, there were more banknotes in Connecticut than there were in all of the states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Kansas, Missouri, Kentucky, and Tennessee combined. So one state in the East, industrial state, had more banknotes or used more banknotes. Essentially what that means is that's where the money was, and that's where the money was kept. Gold bars, this is what we would consider hard cash. Farmers knew the value of this. They liked the weight of it in their hands. Now, obviously, they're not carrying bars around. You guys get what I'm saying? They're carrying, gold coin, silver coin. They understand that value. That has real value to them. And when banks start to move to this, what would be considered a banknote, in this case, $1,000 banknote, The farmers were like, great, that's $1,000, but what's the guarantee that I'm actually going to be able to get $1,000 from this? I know what $1,000 in gold is. I can feel it. I can see it. This just says a piece of paper with some signatures. So there's a lack of trust in that, and rightly so, because the government hadn't done anything to help the farmer. So why would they trust a piece of paper from the farmer? This would be company script. This is from the West Virginia Pulp and Paper Company. It's basically like a personal check or a company check to a worker. So this guy is getting $20 for whatever service he provided the pulp and paper company. Again, the farmers don't really trust this because it's just a sheet of paper with a signature. How do I know that when I get to the bank that I'm going to get my $20? Little timeout here just to give you an indication of what's going on. Small coins, again, gold and silver, and I think it says copper. There it is, becoming fewer, less and less in circulation. So I'm trying to say there's because people are hoarding it. The greenbacks are being taken away, so people start holding on to what they have, this hard money, and so the money's not being kept in circulation. So the government really can't do anything about it. So they go to this idea of postage stamps. Essentially, the value of the postage stamp was equal to change, nickel, dime, quarter, what we would be thinking of today. At one point, the government offered to allow people to turn in those stamps for redeemable cash, provided that the post office could verify that these stamps had never been used. This is just an example of the government trying to help, but typical government, they try to help in ways that they think will work instead of actually listening to the people who need help. And so it fails miserably. At this same time, we start to see railroad rates increasing for shipping and storage. We did talk about the case of Munn versus Illinois, where the owner, Mr. Munn, charged whatever he wanted to for storage and shipping of grains from farmers in the Midwest. And again, because of the lack of government intervention and regulation, he could do that. Now the farmers actually got their case taken to court, and this is what we see the beginning of Granger laws, and we'll talk about Grangers here in just a second. It's this group of Grangers who take this case to the Illinois State Court and then on to the U.S. Supreme Court and actually win. Again, because of deflation in the South, the lack of money in the South, and in the West, the lack of money in circulation, these increasing railroad rates make times as, if not more, worse than they had been in the past. So, since the government is not going to provide any logical, feasible solutions, the farmers themselves decide that, it's time something gets done, and they begin to form alliances. And the most famous alliance is the Grange, or the Grangers Alliances of the 1870s. Now, this starts out as a self-help group. They get together for regular meetings, not monthly, because of the isolated nature of the Midwest farms. It would maybe be, quarterly, maybe every 3 months if they were lucky. But get together for socials, dances, an occasional wedding, and the like. And during those times, they would share things that work for farmer A. Is maybe farmer B can be successful using these kinds of methods, and essentially just get together and social. And so these meetings eventually turn into gripe sessions. Complain about the rates, complain about the banks. And finally, somebody says, we can sit here and do this all the time and complain and complain and complain, or we can just do something. And that's what the Grange is. The Grange, finally, they actually do something. They work on cooperatives and, working together as a group instead of an individual farmer versus the system. They do fix some problems locally, but they can't, they never can take on the major problem of the railroads. The official name of the Grange is the Order of Patrons of Husbandry. We'll look at the definition of husbandry in just a second. This group was started around 1867 after the Civil War. It is the oldest surviving agricultural organization. Lasted until about the 1950s. It was an effective group, and we do see the Populist Party forming from this. They do take on big industry, specifically railroad monopolies. They are the ones responsible for electing politicians sympathetic to farmers to local and state office, and new Granger laws that start to get passed. Again, they're called Granger laws because they favor the farmer. Here's your definition of husbandry. If you're a farmer or have anybody in your family that's a farmer, ask them about husbandry. Typical poster advertising for the Grange. I want to zoom this in real quick. You can see the farmer standing in the middle. It says, "I pay for all." Essentially, here's what the Grange does. They get together for socials. They help each other learn techniques for the farming of the fields. Farmers are not just husband and wife and one kid. They probably have 8 or 9 kids. A lot of that, to be quite honest, they had such big families is because they're producing a working class of people for their farms. Children do go to school. There is some semblance of organization out here. Actually, this looks a lot like a certain organization that I'm familiar with, which I'm not going to go into right now. But, the farmer's involved in a lot. He's not just a hick, as most people back east wanted to believe him to be. Again, collective action. The Alliance works on collective action, and they do try to work on increasing prices for sales on the market by forming commodities. Unfortunately, commodity brokers, we would consider that Wall Street today, got in their way. And again, this is the precursor, the beginnings of the populist movement, and that begins around 1892. We start to see the first populist party candidates elected into major political offices. This group actually started in 1873 as a result of the financial panic of 1873. Political action, Populist Party, 1890, and we begin to see again the beginnings of elected officials around 1892, and we see the last populist official elected in 1896. That's because the Populist Party ceases to exist. We'll get to that in just a second. As we stated many, many times before, South and West farmers is the main membership, main backing of the Populist Party. They nominate they had 2 presidential elections, 1892 and then again in 1896. 1892, very little success at the national level, but huge success at state and local governors and the likes at state and local levels. 1896, they do nominate William Jennings Bryan, the Democratic candidate, for their presidential candidates. It's the first time in history that one man has been nominated for 2 separate parties. William Jennings Bryan was not seeking the populist nomination. He just simply had it. Now, given his background, he is a farmer. He's from Nebraska, a senator from the state. He does sympathize with the farmers. But Bryan's thrown his hat with the Democrats because that's the second biggest party next to Republicans. A little bit more about William Jennings Bryan. He is known for his cross of gold speech and using the religious reference to "you shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." He was heavily criticized for his use of religious connotations in this speech. Essentially, it means Europe was changing to the gold standard. The United States was considering changing to the gold standard. William Jennings Bryan says we don't have to bow down to Europe. If Europe wants to move to the gold standard, let them go. We fought a revolutionary war to separate ourselves from that. They should be following our standards, our examples, not the other way around. Unfortunately, Bryan was a very, very small voice, even though he had the backing of all of the South and all of the West. He had a very small voice when compared to the capitalists and the industrialists and the people who held the money, the northern, eastern Republican bankers and the Midwest industrialists. So the country eventually goes to the gold standard for a time. The platform, what the populists wanted to see happen, direct election of senators. Prior to this, the state and congressional representatives handpick senators. Obviously, that leads to fraud. That leads to patronage. It leads to corruption because there's no Republican representative who's going to pick a Democratic senator for the state. So, the good old boy system was in effect. Let's let the people, the populists say, let's let the people elect the senators. Graduated income tax, you get taxed based on your income. civil service, which we've talked about before with Garfield and Hayes and Arthur, and then an 8-hour workday. Now, if you know anything about farmers, you don't work 8 hours a day. You're lucky to get out of the field in a 12-hour day. This 8-hour day was to keep the laborers, the labor movement, happy. And as I mentioned earlier, we do see a marrying of the labor movement with the farmers. There's power in numbers, and so they threw a bone to the labor movement as part of the Populist Party platform, and it worked. They were given the labor unions gave them their vote. And on to the beginning of the end, some specifics about the party, especially at the end of their what we see at the end of their existence. They demanded for the government to regulate the railroads, and they asked the government to take over the ownership of the railroads, as well as telegraph, telephone, and to create a sub-treasury system which would encourage loaning money on crops in storage before it was sold. That never happened. None of this ever happened. The government does regulate, but long after the Populist Party is out of existence, is gone. They also demand that the government go on to a system known as bimetallism, where instead of using just gold, you use gold and silver to support your paper currency, your hard money. They are demanding essentially inflation. This state of deflation has caused trouble, and the farmers want money in their pockets. They want the government to print more money. The government does pass an act that allows for the mint to print more money, but it's not enough. Again, bimetallism is the big campaign issue in 1896. Looking here at free silver again, using silver or gold to back the paper money. If you go to the bank, you can collect silver or gold in exchange for paper money. And again, that's what they wanted because the farmers knew the value of that gold and silver. Unfortunately, what the farmers maybe they knew or didn't know, maybe they didn't care. Inflation obviously causes prices to go up because when everybody has money, the prices go up because the value of that money decreases. Finally, 1897, the Populist Party ceases to exist. William McKinley is elected. McKinley campaigned very little. He did most of his campaigning from his back porch. He was able to do so because he had money, and the people who supported him brought the newspapers to his house. So McKinley could just stand on his back porch and campaign. William Jennings Bryan, he's trying to get 5-6 states in one day. And, the money that he has is coming from farmers who have no money. So he's wearing himself ragged. But he's stumping, he's campaigning through states, 5 and 6 states in a day, trying to raise the awareness of his cause. The Democrats and Democrats and Populists, as I said, they both nominate William Jennings Bryan. The Democrats they just take a step back and they look at the populist movement, who by 1896 had over 1 million followers, and they see this populist movement as a movement that can, if added to the Democrat Party, could change the momentum in politics. And so after the election, they begin to absorb the Populist Party by adopting all of their platform beliefs. For example, the 8-hour workday. The Democrats, we've always been in favor of an 8-hour workday, and then direct election of senators. Direct election of senators will end corruption in government. We should do that. So that's how they absorb the Populist Party. And again, back to the leadership of the Populists. The leadership was so weak, there's no one to stand up to the Democrats, that they literally lose their existence to the Democrats. Now, William Jennings Bryan does not go away. He's in several more elections. Never wins, but he's in several more, which we will be mentioning down the road. Guys, thanks for listening. Take care.